Hi, my name's Lachlan Ross and welcome to the class lesson of Journalistic Interviewing. In my experience as a journalist, I've found myself interviewing in person, over the phone, Skype, email, and even text message. And the one thing I've learned is that your circumstances can't always be perfect, so you really just need to adapt to what's available at the time. Regardless of how you interview though, two skills are always the same: confidence and being prepared. After this lesson, you'll be able to mentally prepare for journalistic interviews, know the physical tools required to interview, have multiple tricks to engage your subject, and be able to look for strong setting characteristics to note. Hopefully through all of this, you'll be able to increase your confidence through being prepared. Whether it's television, print, or web journalism, the basic skills are still the same. So in this lesson, we're going to cover 3 stages of an interview: preparing, both physically and mentally; questioning, so different techniques; and then post-interview, which I like to call notes and quotes. Stage 1, preparing, both physically and mentally. Physically, your tools for an interview will be a voice recorder and a notepad and pen. With technology these days, your voice recorders are usually going to be electronic, and you can just simply plug them into the computer when you get home and transfer the file over. But the reason you need to bring a notepad and pen as well is if you just bank on your voice recorder taking everything down, and then you either haven't pressed record or your batteries have died, you walk away from the interview with nothing. As long as you're jotting notes with your notepad and pen, then hopefully you'll walk away with at least something if everything else goes wrong. Mentally preparing for an interview involves researching your subject, so knowing who they are, why you're interviewing them, and what their stance or opinion is of whatever you're discussing, planning questions to ask them based off of your research, and then going into an interview without bias. It's important not to come into an interview with a bias, because your job as a journalist is to report a story to the people and let them make a decision, not to slant their decision. Stage 2. Once you get into the questioning, you're in the middle of the interview. There are certain techniques that journalists use during interviews, which incorporate body language, open-ended questions, and listening. Body language is a vital part of making your subject feel comfortable. By either sitting or standing in a warm and open manner, by imitating your subject's position without being too obvious, of course, you allow them to feel comfortable in your presence. This is really important in an interview because once they're feeling comfortable and trust you, they're more willing to open up. Open-ended questions are questions that cannot be answered with a simple yes or no response. They are used to draw quotable answers from your subject, which is extremely important in journalism because you don't just want to be paraphrasing everything, you want to have great quotes from your subject so that you can characterize them more easily. So an example of an open-ended question would be, tell me about the cave you were trapped in. Listening is often an overlooked part of interviewing, but it's important to remember that the story is about the subject and not you. Despite having previously planned questions, it's important to adapt on the fly after one of their answers. Stage 3, post-interview. So once you've finished an interview, many people think that their job's done, but really this is where some of the most important information can be found. After an interview, it's always good to write down any significant details you remember about the physical setting of the interview. Extra details like he was wearing a pink suit can really add to the subject's character in your story later. Quite often people don't think about this at the time because they're so worried about getting the interview. However, the interview isn't just about getting the quotes, it's about describing the character and bringing this character to life. So anything that you can learn about their setting and note down is really quite vital in the end of the piece. Also, try and think of any key quotes as soon as you get out of an interview and make note of them so that you're sure to find them as soon as you get back to your desk. So now we're going to do a small mini quiz just to check the understanding of all of the key concepts from the class. I'll give you a few minutes to go through this and then we'll look at the answers. So if the subject is not answering in quotable responses, you can ask an open-ended question. Physical setting details are important to note post-interview to add depth to your piece. Before conducting an interview, you must research your subject. And finally, do not solely rely on a recording device in interviews. Be sure to also have a notepad and pen. So after taking this lesson, you should now be able to mentally prepare for journalistic interviews, know the physical tools required to interview somebody, have multiple tricks to engage your subject, and be able to look for strong setting characteristics to note. Hopefully you now feel more confident through being prepared. Thanks a lot, and I'll see you next lesson.